Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier by learning from others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and this week on the show, I'm delighted to be joined by Lindsay Berresford, who is the driving force behind a successful handmade camper van business. We're actually Quirky Campers, and we explore their unique business model, the annual festival, Camp Quirky, and their growth strategy. And Lindsay shares their journey from a hobby to a thriving business, overcoming challenges and the importance of building a strong customer service team. And the core of the business is a kind of Airbnb model around Quirky Campers. And we also discuss with Lindsay balancing workload, maintaining core values, and the potential of employee ownership. And plus, Lindsay talks about her focus on self-development and invites listeners to learn more, of course, about Quirky Campers. So make sure you don't miss any future episodes by subscribing to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. You can also nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio if you know someone like Lindsay with an interesting scale-up story, and you can find out how in the show notes below. So for now, stay tuned for a really inspirational conversation with Lindsay Berresford of Quirky Campers. Welcome to ScaleUp Radio. I'm delighted today to be joined by Lindsay Berresford, who is the co-founder of Quirky Campers. So, Lindsay, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it too. I'd love to talk about campers. So, and I guess that's the clue. With some guests, we have to ask, well, there's no clue in the name, but I think there's a clue there. So, tell us about Quirky Campers. What is it that you do?
Yeah, I think there is a clue in the name. So yeah, we are really focused on camper vans, but not just any old camper vans, the quirky kind. And what we mean by that is handcrafted camper vans. So typically what you will see if you're out and about, you might either see a motorhome, those are the large white things with the big foreheads, or you might see the VW is either the kind of classic kind or the modern kind, and that's often what people associate with camper vans and motorhomes. But there is a third way, and that is when people get hold of any kind of van. It might be fresh off the forecourt, or very often it's an ex-builder's van. It might have been an ambulance. It might have had all kinds of previous lives, and they either themselves or pay somebody else to convert it into something that is bespoke, unique, one-off, and perfectly meets their needs. So that is the area that we're really focused on, and we have a number of different kind of business streams that are related to that area. Okay. So the biggest and the original one is a camper van hire platform. Okay. And so again, we specialize in the area. We only accept handcrafted campers onto our platform, and we're essentially connecting owners of handcrafted camper vans with customers. So it's similar to an Airbnb style model that tends to help people understand how it works, except that it's selective and curated. So that's one of the things that we do. Many other things have kind of evolved because we're so embedded in this niche. People ask us to do things and we respond. So, we had a number of owners who, because people's lifestyles change and at some point they might want to separate from their camper van, people wanted to sell it through us because they wanted to find people who loved camper vans like theirs. They felt like if they were going to sell it on eBay or Auto Trader, it was going to get lost among these kind of identikit type of camper vans. So in the early days, we were just kind of setting up a blog post essentially to sell their van. We now have a very well-functioning sales directory where anybody can list a camper van for sale. We have a huge number of buyers visiting that page, and we're now on about 600 camper vans for sale each month.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of turning into a much bigger part of our business quite unexpectedly. It was a fascinating journey, but basically Google immediately, as soon as we started doing it, went, oh, you know things about camper vans. We're going to immediately bump you up into the top 4 for camper vans for sale. And so we get 1.3 million hits per year, people looking for camper vans for sale. So that was kind of an unexpected thing.
And is that did you say that was a kind of commission model, or?
No, so it's people literally just pay for a listing.
Right.
And so it's kind of high volume, low cost. They pay £10 for a basic listing and additional for extra photos, featured listing, that kind of thing. So again, because we are competing with the likes of Gumtree, eBay, Auto Trader, those are kind of our main competitors, we needed to do it on a similar model to them.
Right. Yeah.
So then the other thing that came about was our professional converter directory. And again, people kept coming to us and saying, do you do camper van conversions? And although we'd done our own. It's not something, it's not a business that we're in, but we knew lots of really amazing people who did offer that service. And so over time, it went from kind of a Word document that had a list of businesses that we knew about to a proper directory. And the business model for that, people pay either a monthly or annual subscription to be listed on there. There's also an option to be Quirky approved, where we'll check a whole load of things about that business to make sure that we're really comfortable putting our name to it and saying, yes.
Quirky approved, so you got a QA.
Quirky approved, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
And so we've got 70 businesses on that converted directory now. So then the other thing that we do is we're basically providing information for self-builders. And the main way that we do that is through our book. But there's also, you can join the Book Owners Club, where essentially, as well as our very lovely sort of coffee table / manual of a book, you also get a whole load of video tutorials with that. So it can literally take you through figuring out what base vehicle to buy, planning your layout, to, right through to doing your carpentry, installing your electrics, your gas, all of those things.
Amazing.
Is that all? Oh, goodness me, no, one more. But this one is currently in a hiatus, and that's our event. So we have been for a number of years running an annual festival called Camp Quirky, which is exclusively focused on handmade campervans. This year we've had a year off. I imagine this is something we're going to talk about more through the conversation, because it's one of those areas where it's been a really interesting challenge. It's kind of had its highs and lows, successes, failures, and we're kind of in this, I guess, decision point with that now. So yeah, the event is the 5th business stream.
Very good. All right. And I almost feel like I don't need to ask this question, but what makes you different then from other people that are out there? You're obviously quirky.
Yeah, and that's really it. And the industry has evolved so much since we started. We weren't setting out to create a campervan hire platform, but the only things that were available when we started was a platform that specialized exclusively in motorhomes and another that specialized exclusively in VWs, and there was nothing in between. And so there are a lot more platforms out there now. There are platforms that have started in Holland, Germany, France, Australia, Portugal, and then they have gone international. So lots of those players have come into the UK market. They tend to have had huge amounts of funding. So they've got budgets on a very different scale to ours. So there's a lot more choice out there now, but there is still consistently nobody else who's doing what we're doing, and that is that focus on the handcrafted. And because we are the only people who do that, it's not the other platforms wouldn't allow those on their platform, but they're naturally drawn to us because they want to kind of sit alongside like-minded owners and similar kind of aesthetic.
Brilliant.
So that's still what we do that nobody else does.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned sort of 1.3 million hits for the on the classifieds bit of it, and how would you describe where you are in terms of your scale? What about the team size, or maybe the number of hires that you're doing? How else would you describe the sort of size for others?
Yeah, so some of the key figures, I guess. So we are 10 plus myself and my co-founder, which actually feels like a lovely team size. I'm really happy with that. We're currently on, I haven't even checked today's figures because it does change around this time, but we're on about 260 campervans available for hire on our platform. So that's a real key figure. That and the number of monthly listings on the sales platform are the things that we're kind of really monitoring. In terms of the number of hires, what we're always aiming to do is maintain our occupancy alongside the growth in the number of campervans that we're making available.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
So we are always aiming for an average occupancy of 12 bookings per year per campervan.
Okay.
Which is about double that of our competitors, who typically get about 6 bookings per year for their campervans.
And does that, because I would imagine a little bit like Airbnb, I suppose, I can choose how much I actually, I might say, what, I only want one listing, one guest a year or something. Is that the same with you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, another thing that is just a slight differentiator between us, our competitors, is that the vast majority of our vans are on instant book. Whereas on the other campervan platforms, it tends to be the vast majority of their owners are on a kind of request to book type of system. So we do really encourage our owners to go on instant book because it makes a huge difference in terms of the number of bookings that they will get, but they're completely welcome to book out as many dates as they want to throughout the year for their own use. Some people might block out large periods of time because they don't know when they're going to go away, and then as it gets closer they might kind of clear their calendar. Others are more organized in knowing what holidays they're going to be doing a year in advance. Others are actually really happy to work around customers, so they'll see when the bookings come in and then they'll be kind of flexible in their own use, but there's absolutely no restrictions whatsoever on how much somebody can use it. People can even have their own website and rent it out direct to customers through their own website, and we're happy for them to use our booking system to do so. The only thing is that we don't allow them to also list on our competitor website, so we are exclusive.
Right.
In that sense.
Yeah, very good. And what got you into this in the first place?
Yeah, so I had this dream for a while of owning a camper van. It was something that a number of my friends had. There was just something about it that I found so appealing, that real sense of kind of ability to be really spontaneous and a real sense of freedom. So then when I happened to get together with my partner, who was a carpenter and had all of the necessary skills to do it. I mean, it's not saying it's why we got together, but it was a happy coincidence. Yeah. So that was we did that maybe a year into our relationship. It was one of the very first projects that we did together. We then went on to build a business, build a house, have 3 children. So it was kind of a good test project to say, can we collaborate on something? So we worked on that together. It was a huge amount of work, as anybody who's done a camper van conversion will tell you. We often give a rule of thumb of like around 300 hours. So that gives you a bit of a ballpark. Yeah. We possibly spent even more time on it. David did this kind of very elaborate carved ply interior that he'd been inspired by some really wonderful architecture in Bristol. And so we used it for ourselves for a few years, and then we were going away for 6 months. We were spending 6 months in Nairobi, and we couldn't afford to just keep it sitting outside our house for that time, but also we couldn't just sell her. I mean, she was a part of our family. So that was kind of what got that idea going in our minds. And as I said, at that time, there were these 2 other platforms that we looked into. We even contacted them. They both said, we don't understand what this thing is, this builder's van with a carved ply interior. It had a wood burner. They just couldn't fit anywhere in their understanding of the industry or camper vans or customers. Yes. And so at that point we thought, okay, this is either a brilliant idea that nobody has yet thought of, or it's a terrible idea and that's why nobody's doing it. Which maybe that's a thought that many people who are starting businesses have, right? And you can't know until you give it a go. At the time, I hadn't heard of the kind of concept of fail fast and fail cheap, but that was basically what we were going for. Right. The only thing we really invested in, we got a friend to help us build a website. It was a few £100s. The major investment was that we got a respray because the van looked a bit tatty on the outside. And so we spent, I think, maybe £2,000 spraying the outside of the van. And that was basically the extent of our business costs. And in our first year, we booked 90 nights without doing anything. Wow. So we were delighted with that. I still don't actually really know how people found us at the time. We had no idea about marketing. We didn't know about any of it, but people did, and they loved it. So that kind of was a basic proof of concept. I think the second key moment was we were thinking about doing multiple vans and renting them out. That's why we'd called it Quirky Campers rather than Quirky Camper. Yeah. But as we reflected on it, we realized that if we went down that road, thinking about how you're going to actually spend your time is quite key, isn't it? So we realized we were going to spend our time cleaning and doing maintenance. And those weren't things that we felt excited or inspired by. But we were really excited about building the website, starting to think about building a booking system, getting stuck into the marketing. And so it was we sort of had that in our minds. Then we had some friends approach us and say, what if we did our own van and then we rented it out through your website? And so that was basically how we became a platform.
Yeah, and a way that you can scale much more rapidly as well, rather than have to go out and buy each camper van one by one.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because so often when we've come into contact with somebody, I don't know, in a sort of business mentoring way, people have said, why don't you just buy a load? People often have the instinct that should be a quicker or easier way to scale, but that would have involved a huge amount of investment somewhere to store them all.
Yeah.
So we've really enjoyed
Yeah.
scaling this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's essentially, if it works, the model works for Airbnb and for Uber and people like that, when essentially they've created these multi-billion-pound businesses without any real asset of the, with that, no taxis or no properties of their own, or maybe one or two. But that's a great way to scale, isn't it? If you can get the model working right. Excellent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the other kind of key decision point for us was sticking with our niche, because that's the other thing that people will often come along and say, well, why are you sticking with your niche? Because it slows your growth, and it absolutely does. Like there's no question about it. For a long time we were turning away 3/4 of the people who got in touch with us. Now we're evidently putting out clearer information, because that number is not so high, so people are getting a better understanding of what we're looking for. But what we have instead is we've expanded into all these different business streams that wouldn't have been available to us. People wouldn't have been coming to us to provide those things if we hadn't have carved out that niche. So it's been an interesting one, and it also has done a lot of our marketing for us.
Because you've essentially built a real reputation and a community around what you do. Absolutely.
And we rank really well on Google because we have built all of these backlinks entirely organically, because people want to link back, they want to share photos of the kinds of things that we're doing. So again, we know that our competitors are spending a lot of money on Google ads. In fact, some of them are even spending more per booking than they're actually getting in commission to try and claim as much of the market as possible. And we don't have to compete in that level because we're offering something really unique. So that's been a really interesting journey, and a question that has come up and we've considered each time, but ultimately I think we've made the right choice.
I think it's a really good lesson for others to listen to. That, and I'm a big proponent of that. Is the focus, really understanding what your niche is, where you really bring the value, and focusing on that. If that niche is large enough to build the kind of business that you want to build, then in a way, why would you do anything else? Why would you spread yourself thin across multiple segments and not necessarily be that great at any one of them, when you can be brilliant at one that's big enough for what you want?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think because we have now had all of these other much bigger players come in with much bigger budgets, we would either have had to have really got serious about attracting investment, which wasn't something along the journey. That's something we would consider now maybe, but hasn't been something we've been particularly keen on. So I think we just would have got squashed flat if we were trying to compete on the same playing field that they were. And we've just been quite happy going on playing on an entirely separate field.
Well, and it's funny you should use that word, because that's sometimes the analogy that we use, which is, if you're trying to create a competitive advantage, then one of the first, or equally, if you just think about creating a business that's got sustainability and got legs in it, the first question is, what playing field are we playing on? That's the first one. Are we playing on the same one as everybody else, or are we going to make our own playing field? And whichever decision we make, once we've decided those playing fields, or that one playing field, what's our strategy to win on that playing field? And that's really what strategy comes down to, in creating a long-term sustainable business. So it starts with what fields are we going to play on?
Interesting.
And that's taken you out to Australia as well, isn't it? I think
New Zealand. Yeah. So that's been a really interesting journey. So we were approached by a couple in New Zealand, Leanne and Dan. That must have been 2018, I think. And we've actually had loads of approaches from all over the world over the years, from people who are, in at various levels of seriousness about wanting to start a Quirky Campers Canada or Quirky Campers Bulgaria, or whatever it might be. And we've kind of been vaguely interested, considered different business models. But we had a fascinating conversation with Leanne and Dan really early on. I think the thing that really struck us, so we've had a lot of people who are very excited about camper vans, which is all very well, but where you get the impression that they think that perhaps their days are going to be spent choosing paint colors for camper van interiors. And the fact that Leanne approached us and she had already started doing research on what type of insurance she would need helped us to understand that she really got that. So she had the passion. She was really excited about the brand. She was really excited about the concept, but also she had already figured out what she would actually be spending her time doing and what the key barriers were going to be and how to overcome them. And so we continued those conversations with her in a very different way to the conversations that we'd had with other people. Choosing the franchising way of doing it, it really made a lot of sense to us because we loved that she was going to have that sense of ownership, but kind of within a structure that we felt confident to put our brand name to. We were excited to be able to share the things that we developed that worked. I think we totally underestimated what was involved in franchising. And it was very much a kind of self-taught process because we did have some support, but also a lot of the support in this area is incredibly expensive. So yeah, it was one of those kind of classic, all right, well, we'll Google it until we figure it out. A lot of learning by doing. Thankfully Leanne was up for being an experiment, because we couldn't claim that this was anything other than the very first time we were doing it. And we've really loved it, and we've loved working with her. She's done a wonderful, wonderful job in New Zealand, and I'm really, it's so nice to feel really proud to be associated with that business. It was a huge amount of work, and we kind of thought maybe this would be the thing that we would do, but it hasn't turned into something that we're keen to do in loads of countries.
Oh, really? Okay. So you're not, okay.
I mean, we would consider, again, I guess, if the right people came along with the right level of understanding. But also one of the things that we understood since then is that franchising law varies hugely country to country. So it would be virtually impossible for us to do it in Australia, for example. I think we could get into the US if we had like £1 million legal budget, that kind of thing. So it varies a lot. So we would need to be really, it would need to be the right people also in the right location. But that's not to say that we wouldn't consider growing internationally, but I think possibly not on a franchise basis.
Interesting. And take me through. So obviously the franchising is one distinct area in a way, but take me through some of the challenges and the things that you've learned from going right at the beginning when you booked out those first 90 days with your original Quirky camper van. What are some of the stepping stones, but equally some of the challenges things you've learned along the way?
I mean, so many.
Where would we start?
Exactly where to start. One of the things that I think one of the themes for me is I think that we could have been bolder throughout, honestly. I'm really glad that we've grown organically. I think we've taken a huge amount from that, and I think we have figured out how to do everything properly and frugally before we've scaled it. So I do think there's huge merit in that. But I also think that there's definitely times throughout the whole journey that we could have been bolder. We could have had greater faith in ourselves. I think we could have, for instance, taken on staff sooner.
Okay.
But it was very much a hobby for the first essentially 5 years. It was when we had our son, and then very quickly we had twins. And we realized that we didn't have time for hobbies anymore. So either we needed to give this up or we needed for it to be our income. And so we both gave up our other work and decided to kind of do this more seriously. But I think at that point, potentially, we could have thrown a bit of our own money at least behind it and kind of pushed it quicker. Nonetheless, we set ourselves the goal of reaching 200 vans within 5 years, which we achieved. I think we were about 3 weeks late off our target, which was quite funny. So that was a great experience. But I think we definitely could have been bolder. In terms of other things that happened along the way, we also worked with a third partner for a while. So we had a third director come along. He bought into the business. We had a really great few years working together. And then after the pandemic, I guess probably mid-pandemic, it started to get really, really tough. And it's something that's kind of, a couple of years ago we parted ways. It's something that's coming back round into my mind now as I'm doing more self-development, thinking about relationships. And, I think my regret with that is that we hadn't realized that we needed to prioritize that as a relationship, and that we needed to really make that a focus. Like if you're going to work with somebody as a partner, as a co-director, as well as doing the work together, you also have to do the work on your relationship, just like you do in a marriage, with kids, whatever. And I think that we didn't know that at the time, honestly. Right. And I think we didn't address issues early enough. We kind of thought that the best strategy was, if we were struggling with something, we should just push it down and get on with it. And I think we've really learned about the importance of raising things that you're struggling with, and not needing to sort of necessarily have to justify yourself or be right, but just say, this thing isn't working for me, or I want to talk about this thing. And I think we've really improved on that. But I wish that we had done more of that. And so that was a huge learning. I'm really proud of all of us that we managed to do that separation in a respectful way. But nonetheless, that's something that I've been really reflecting on.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you advised to people then going through that kind of breakup with a partner, business partner?
Yeah, I mean, I think, being clear and honest about what you want. And I think one of the things that we did realize was that this was our baby to some extent. And we had kind of said, oh yeah, of course, all decisions will be made equally. But I think actually in reality, there were some of those key decisions that we wanted to make. And so we kind of got to that level of honesty that was the point that we wanted to get to. But I think we had to, it's very easy to get lost in your own feelings and emotions about it. And it's very, very easy to blame the other person. We always want to blame the other person because it's painful to take accountability. But I think that process of taking accountability, realizing where you went wrong, and also meeting the other person as a human, that was what we were eventually able to do. We had a lot of conversations where we really reflected on the fact that we really, really wanted the best for this person. We really wanted him to do well out of this, have a wonderful future. And we tried to just keep bringing ourselves back to that. At the time, we were having a lot of Zoom conversations because we were still in the pandemic. I think at that point, it was really critical to have a face-to-face conversation. Also, my husband / co-founder and this other person at one point met just the two of them, and that kind of one-on-one conversation where they actually only talked about the human side. They didn't talk about business at all. They just talked about, we don't want this to end in an unpleasant way. That was really profound. And we were then able to work out the details of the business arrangement off the back of that. So I guess it's the same kind of lesson. It's like, put the relationship first and then you can work out the other stuff.
Yeah.
But you do also have to be honest with yourself about what you actually want and where you're willing to compromise and where you're not.
And were they a shareholder in the business? Yeah. So how did that play out in terms of, how did you manage that from a, I guess if you had to buy them out, that's a strain on the business.
So we did, and again, that was something that took a lot of thought, but we did realize that ultimately we wanted to have that flexibility where we could just make decisions without consulting a third person. If we wanted to be acquired, make an acquisition, whatever, we kind of wanted to have that freedom. So we did offer a buyout. We eventually, again, this was something that I Googled. I was still a bit like, why is nobody telling us that we can do this? But we did a share buyback. So the business actually bought back the shares itself, which, you have to be careful that you are absolutely following the letter of the law on that. But it was totally appropriate for our case, where it was in order for to protect the interests of the business going forward. That person wasn't going to retain any of their shares. So, it made complete sense. But it did mean that we had to work really hard to have enough profit in the business so that the business could do that. And then it took us back to zero. So, we've then had to really work hard to get back to a good position. But nonetheless, I think that was one of the areas in which we were actually able to be quite bold. We just realized that was something we had to do. We were happy to be able to offer him what we thought was a really a generous price that he was also able to accept was a generous price, and left us all feeling good about that.
Yeah, very good. So what are some of the other things that you've faced within the industry that you're in that have been challenges along the way?
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, you must have so many conversations about this, but the pandemic was a really big one. It was a kind of interesting mixed bag for us.
Yeah.
In the early days, we thought, well, great, if we all need to be in our own self-contained units,
Yep.
camper vans are going to be the way
That's
forward. And then,
the
of course,
demands for vans went through the roof, didn't it?
well, not when we were in lockdown. So the first thing that happened was, and actually we decided to ground our camper vans even before there was an official lockdown, because we had had so many people coming to us and saying, we don't think this is safe. In hindsight, with everything else that we know, I think it probably was very safe, but we took a business decision, and that was really tough to do that before the government was making that decision, and we had to really work with our owners on that. And then we had months and months of still needing to have a customer service team who's, we were essentially paying them to give people refunds and credit notes and move their bookings. So that was a really hard time. We did, during that time, we started offering online workshops because loads of people started converting vans.
Yeah.
And so we had these kind of sell-out Zoom workshops where we'd bring on an expert. They'd talk through a particular aspect of a conversion. People would learn, they'd go out and do their own conversions. We also wrote our book in that time. So we kind of used it effectively in that way. So we did do quite a lot of pivoting. And then once things did open up, of course, there was a huge rush, on camper vans. And actually 2020, I mean, we spent about 2/3 of the year, I think, in not being able to send vans out. But nonetheless, in those times that it was open, did quite well. 2021 was a really strong year. But again, that kind of constantly having to cancel bookings, Glastonbury being cancelled was a huge deal for us, because that is our peak weekend of the whole year.
Right.
And then just the kind of accounting confusion of having all of these credit notes, and we can't reconcile any of that until the booking has gone out. So that was, even though there was that boom, it was still a really tough time, I would say, business-wise. And then trying to find some level of normality after that. There was then a time where lots of people were wanting to go abroad, and now, I think we're just sort of getting back to a kind of a more normal status. So that's been one of the challenges. And then the other challenge along the way has actually just been something that feels very dull, that I mentioned in relation to New Zealand earlier, which is insurance. Just a kind of relentless challenge. There's so few providers. We do have one provider that we use primarily, and they give our owners a good deal, but we still would love to have more options to choose from. And when recently they have kind of two underwriters, one of them stopped providing insurance for a while, and that was a massive deal for us. So, we would love to be in a position where we have more options, essentially, in that area. That's been tough.
Very good. Very good. And what have you learned about the people side of the business? You've mentioned customer service team. You've got 10 people plus 2 of you.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the people stuff. The bit that I love most of all is recruiting new people. And it's funny. It gives me such a buzz. So one of the things I often say is, if we were selling jobs, we would definitely be millionaires by now, because when we advertise a job, we get typically 800 to 900 applicants.
Wow.
Yeah, people really, really want to work with us, which, is such a huge honor and a privilege. I don't take that lightly. I wouldn't go and work for just any old person. It's a really big deal. We spend so many of our waking hours on our job. So I think it's a huge deal. And I think it is because a huge part of our focus is on making this a really amazing place to work. That really matters to us. That's interesting and exciting to us. We have had a remote team always, because from the early days, we were like, well, we're doing all of this work on our laptops. I can't really see why we would want to limit our recruitment pool to just the people who happen to live in a radius of where we happen to live and where our office is. So we'd always worked remotely. So again, that was actually one of the kind of lesser challenges, I guess, of COVID, is that we were like, cool, we already do this. It does mean we have to pay a lot of attention to it. To do it well, you have to be really conscious about how you're working, and we're learning all the time. And of course, we make plenty of mistakes. But on the whole, I think we're developing some really good ways of working together. And people love the flexibility, and they love the freedom. They love the fact that they can go off on a jaunt in their van and work from their van. We've had lots of people who live full time in their vans who work for us.
Okay. So sort of almost the nomad.
Yeah. Yeah. And we really welcome that. It's people's responsibility to make sure that they have got a system that works for them. They've got a great Wi-Fi connection, but why would we care where they're working from? And that means they're really happy and content. People don't often leave. We have a very, very low turnover of staff.
And just a little thing then on that, if you have 800 or 900 people applying for every job, how do you filter? What do you do to filter that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because I don't know if this is something that people are interested in. I get really nerdy about it. And again, it's one of these things where we've kind of just developed our own way of doing things. I have actually never worked for another organization. I've either been freelance or run my own business. So many of these things I'm inventing from scratch, and I don't know if it's what everybody does or it's what nobody does, but we develop the things that work for us. So our initial application, we never ask for CVs. We get people to fill in a Google form. And, part of that is what relevant work experience do you have? And then they have to comb through their CV. I mean, obviously, best practice is that people change their CVs for every job application, but I couldn't read 800 CVs and I couldn't possibly compare them on a like-for-like basis. So we asked them a bunch of questions about why they want to work for Quirky Campers, about why they're attracted to that role, about what their personal qualities are, some things that are specific to the job, and what's their relevant experience, and do they have any relevant qualifications. But generally not too bothered about the qualifications people hold. I couldn't tell you on our team what level people have been educated to. I could only tell you what their personal talents and skills are. So we sift it via those Google forms. One of the things that we do is we actually do a word count, and if people have used less than 20 words to answer a question, the why do you want to work for Quirky Campus question, then they'll be sifted out, because we know that they haven't even taken the time to answer that question. Often we will kind of choose which is the key question, and we might just read through those, and on the basis of that question decide whether or not to read the rest of their application. We'll score it. Sometimes we do have all of those people being scored by 2 different people, because some members of our team are so amazingly diligent. They just want to absolutely make sure they're making the right choice, even with that number of applicants. And then people always go the kind of short list, and we'll aim for a particular number depending on what the role is. We might be aiming for 20 or 30 or 40 shortlisted candidates. They'll always go through to a second round, and we will give them a task or a set of tasks. Recently, we were recruiting for a marketing manager, and what we decided to do, for a number of reasons, one of which was to avoid people using AI. Now, I'm very up for people using AI in a strategic way, but I didn't want to ask them about, to create a marketing strategy for us, which they could do through AI, and they might not even understand it. So I wanted to make sure that people understood what they were doing. So we asked them to record a 10-minute video, which was a critique of our website and our social media. And we asked them to address search engine optimization, calls to action, the aesthetics, the consistency, the story, those kinds of things. And it was absolutely phenomenal how much you could tell about people's depth of expertise and ability to apply it to our business through this video. I mean, it was amazing. I was absolutely thrilled. And then for the third round, so what we want to do is by the time they get to interview, we basically want to know they could do the job. And then we want to see if they would be the right fit for our team and our values in that interview process. So we then interviewed 5 people. And I'm really, really delighted with the person that we have brought on. But I'm somebody who's constantly developing. And so I've never done the same recruitment process twice. It always has those 3 stages, but exactly what's involved in those 3 stages varies every time.
No, I think that's great. I think that's really, really useful. You're filtering in a way that's putting a bit of onus on the candidate rather than you sifting through CVs. So you're getting quickly to people that actually are properly interested and potentially capable of doing it. And then you've got a test of some sort that is a real test as opposed to a theoretical. What would you do in this sort of situation? But actually getting them to a practical test, and then the team bit. So no, nice, very good. Very good.
And I mean it's really funny. I think because one of my skills, I'm very much a sort of jack of all trades. I don't have any particular specialist skills other than, I would say, seeing the potential in people and kind of seeing their inner genius and brilliance and kind of matching that up with a role. And I think that's why I get so excited about recruitment, because I just sort of, I don't know, it feels like I'm sort of rummaging through some kind of treasure chest to find the perfect gem that's going to be just the right fit for our team. And that gives me a real thrill. And so I guess in terms of, we were talking about the people stuff more generally, I think that's another thing that we've really tried to do is shape our roles around the real humans who join the team. So we want to make sure we've got great people that we want to keep on the team. And I guess we take our probationary period really seriously, because even with a great recruitment process, there's only so much you can know until you're actually working with somebody. And so we want to make sure that this is absolutely the right person for the team. But once they are, we don't want to just kind of settle with them just doing the job they started. We want to keep kind of monitoring what are the bits of the job that really bring them to life, that they love, where they're really adding value, and kind of continue to mold that role. And so that's something that we find really thrilling, and I think probably one of the reasons why people stick around, because their role can continue to adapt according to the things that they're interested in.
Very good. Excellent. You mentioned as well about events and how things are changing. So what's happening there? You said you were doing an annual event.
So the event started out as a meetup of our owners, because one of the great things about our business model is, although we're a platform and it's kind of virtual, we, unlike Airbnb, our owners can move.
Yes.
And so we thought, wouldn't it be fun if we bring all our owners together? We can all just nose around each other's vans, share our experiences, have a lovely weekend together, build that sense of community. So we first did that when, we had relatively few vans on. I think our first meetup was 16 owners or something. The day before, we'd posted something on Facebook saying, we're meeting with 16 of our owners tomorrow. And all of these people were messaging and saying, where can I come? I want to come and see the vans. I want to book one, but I'd like to see them in person, or I'm doing my own. Can I come? So we just sort of popped the location on Facebook and said, yeah, sure, come between 2 and 4 tomorrow, or whatever it was. And 50 people turned up, and we were like, blimey. And so the following year, we did it in a slightly more organized way. We still had just invited our owners, but we then sold, they were essentially parking tickets for $5 because we had a limited parking lot. And again, we had about 100 cars that we could fit in, and those tickets sold out in a day or something. And so that was when we realized that there was something more to this than just as an owners meetup, that we kind of at the last minute decided we could invite other people along to. So we realized there was a real hunger for an event. The event grew out of that. In the early days, we just sort of did everything ourselves. There was a lot of bringing in favors, borrowing a mate's gazebo, all that kind of thing. We were able to do it pretty cheaply, and either break even or have a small profit. And the purpose of the event wasn't to make money. It really was just to kind of bring our community together. But as the event grew, obviously we were spending more and more and more time on it, investing more and more into it. And it got to the point where we kind of thought, it does actually have to also bring in a bit of money in order for it to be viable, in order for it to make sense. But I think with the thing that I've been reflecting on, we do hold our principles and our values incredibly highly. And we tend to prize those things over making money. And I think that's been a real strength of ours. But I think we held such high standards and such high principles for the event in terms of the professionalism of it, in terms of the kind of amount of provision that we were putting on for our attendees, and in terms of things around, say, our sustainability. So as far as we know, we're the only event of that size that has run entirely on solar power, which means a huge number of batteries, solar panels, etc., like multiple power providers, very complex systems, somebody whose full-time job it is just to make sure that we're kind of balancing. I'm realizing I do not have the technical knowledge to even describe this very well, but basically the draw on the power and making sure that we have enough supply. It's basically supply and demand of power. And so that kind of, those costs ended up really spiraling. And so when then costs really leapt up in the past year, at our last event, we made a fairly significant financial loss. And as we were looking at a 2024 event, we were realizing that on the basis of the budget that we had, and what the fact that we didn't want to increase ticket prices because we've got a budget sensitive audience in that way, that we were kind of looking at a best case scenario of break even, but a really significant risk. Events are inherently risky.
Yeah.
And so on that basis, we realized we couldn't take that level of risk for a break even best case scenario. But it was interesting because we just this past weekend exhibited at another kind of van festival. And it made me realize that a lot of the kind of, say, the VW festivals or the camper van festivals, they come from a different origin, more of a kind of show with a bit of festival frills on it. Whereas, the festivals that I've typically gone to, or the kinds of people we bring in, are working, huge independent festivals, Shambhala, Glastonbury, Boomtown, where people are paying £200, £300, £400 for a ticket. And so I think we were kind of aiming for that level of provision, but not able to charge those ticket prices because there are other events that you can go to for £50, £60 for the weekend. So I've just been really reflecting over the weekend of, we've kind of ended up being so principled that we have no event, which I guess is the most sustainable type of event that you could have. So there's an argument for that. But it was just really getting me reflecting on that. And I guess, I think there is a sense of irony that we wanted things to be so good that we've ended up with a not event. And so it just got me thinking about one of the conversations I had. Was really useful with one of the guys who was running that event. He said, I think you just need to go back to your punters, your previous ticket holders, and say, rank these elements of the event. What's most important to you? What are you actually coming for? And then build an event around that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there are things that we could save costs on that really would not impact on people's experience or the things they're fundamentally coming for. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But it's, I now want to go back to the budget. I want to have some other conversations. I'm not going to run an event where I feel like we have no sustainability focus, like it's not beautiful and well dressed and we don't have great music, where we don't have really quality content. So it's a question of, can we do that, but in a pared back way where we can still offer it at a reasonable price? And so that's where we're at with it. So, I mean, you really caught me right in the middle of this thought process.
And it's great. I'm sure for people listening that might be thinking of running events as part of what they do, or also people that are doing it. And I'm sure they'll take a lot from the way that you're going through that thought process and the lessons that you've learned already, because it's a great thing to imagine. This would be great, we put on this event, but as you say, the practicalities are of it, if it's diverting lots of time and money, and actually not much coming back, what's it for other than the community? And that could be enough on its own, but if it's causing you a financial cash flow problem, then that's not sustainable. So
well, that was it. And we were then in this position where we had then re-angled it towards it being a profit-making venture rather than just something to promote our business. And so then when it wasn't doing that, it's like, okay, so we really need to stop and take stock. And if it were just to promote our business, then I think we need to be really clear about what it needs to achieve in order to justify the cost. I think people really underestimate what goes into events. I mean, it's just, the workload is huge. And if it's not something you're doing day in, day out, it was also a huge challenge for our whole team to kind of have to continue to run the day-to-day of the rentals. Vans are still going out, coming back. We've still got owners coming on board. And to somehow balance that with something that is so like peaks and troughs in the time and the workload that's needed. So, and
this is it's another argument for that focus bit, isn't it? Is if you've even within a niche focus, there are lots of things you could do, but actually, maybe there's just a handful that really are what drive what the business is about, and maybe that's where the focus should be, and leave some of the peripheral things maybe to other people or whatever. But
I mean, it's an endless challenge for me because I'm an ideas factory. I just we have had embargoes on new ideas sometimes because I just have to stop so I don't destroy our poor team. No more new ideas, Lindsay.
I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of us out there that are full of all of these ideas, and yes, we
Sure.
we have to hone them down a little bit and focus. Good. All right. Well, we've had a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it, Lindsay. It's really good. Where do you want to be in 5 years? What's what's the legacy you want to build, or where do you want to be in 5 years?
So I think we would like to, I'd say, grow to probably about 500 camper vans on the platform. That feels like a really good number. And then I think at that point, probably just continue at a fairly steady level. I don't want to be the biggest, but I do want to continue to be the best. I want to continue to, keep our current star rating is, I think, 4.94 stars across thousands and thousands of bookings. And that's something I'd really like to maintain and continue to be an amazing place to work. So those are kind of the key things that drive us. And then I would say to really focus in even more on the sustainability side of things. So we do already balance all of the miles that are driven by our customers. But I think one of the things I'm interested in the next few years, we're really focusing on electric camper vans. And I also want to think more about how we can help our customers think about the kinds of adventures that they can have closer to home. It's really fun we drove to Albania and back a couple of years ago. It was an amazing experience. But also, you can drive an hour down the road and have a really exceptional experience. So, I'd like to put some more focus on that. One of the things that I'm interested to explore, and again, we're kind of still thinking about this, but the possibility of maybe some kind of employee ownership. I'd love to essentially build a really solid, sustainable business that can continue for years and years to come, regardless of whether David and myself are involved in it. And I have so much confidence in our team that I think that would be one of the really interesting avenues to pursue.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. Yeah, and number of businesses that we work with have gone down a route of some form of employee shared ownership scheme. So it can be a great way of motivating the business, as you say, giving it that long term life as well. That's beyond just the time that you want to work in it. Very good. Excellent. So are you all right for a couple of quick fire questions before?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could go back to the younger Lindsay, what advice would you give yourself?
Good question. I think, I think probably that you are going to be most limited by your imagination and your ability to be bold. And so just go for it. Like, think as big as you can and absolutely throw yourself at it. And worst case scenario, it doesn't work out. But often it does, and often we're the ones that get in our own way. Brilliant.
Okay, good. It sounds like you've been on a bit of a self-development journey as well recently. Are there any particular resources that you'd like to point out to other people, whether they be books or podcasts or other types of resources?
Yeah, great question. I mean, therapy. Therapy and plenty of it. We've actually had a provider called Spill that we've been using in the business that provide therapy on tap for your team members. People can just book a session at any time, which has been an amazing resource. In terms of other podcasts, so I guess I listen to quite a lot of things that have different kinds of relationship focus. And what I find is, even when they're focusing on one specific aspect, so for instance, I love Dr. Becky Kennedy, who talks about parenting, and I find that so much of what she talks about in relation to parenting also applies to being a leader. It's really fascinating. So I see a whole lot of crossover. What else do I love listening to Brene Brown, obviously. What else am I listening to at the moment? I listen to these two people who do a podcast, Jimmy and Ricky, on relationships. I think they could do with some podcasting lessons from you, actually, Kevin, because their podcast skills aren't great, but I love the stuff they talk about. Again, they're talking about couple relationships, but I find so much of it applies when I'm thinking about relationships with colleagues, relationships with family. the ability to kind of give and receive feedback and working on being less defensive, I think are really key elements of my self-development in all areas of my life. So yeah, there's probably a few of the things that I'm listening to at the moment.
Very good. Excellent. Any bits of technology or apps that you find very useful?
Technology in my life. I mean, this is not in any way original, but honestly, the uses I get out of Canva. I just,
Right. Yeah.
that software just absolutely does it for me, because I have no graphic design skills, but I feel like anybody with, once you've had somebody do your basic branding for you and you've got all the elements that you need, the colors, the fonts, you can make something look great. I never get tired of that.
Yeah.
The other one, which I find incredibly powerful, we've tended to keep a lot of our marketing, almost all of our marketing in-house, including our search engine optimization. And I've used SEMrush for that, and I find that absolutely amazing.
Okay.
It's expensive, so you have to, that has to be a big source of your customers and your traffic to make sense. But it's an incredibly powerful tool, and I think actually you can do a lot of stuff that you would otherwise be paying external people for through that. So yeah, those are probably top of mind at the moment.
Very good. Excellent. Well, it has been absolutely fascinating, Lindsay. If people would like to get hold of you or find out more about Quirky Campers, what's the best way for them to do that? And I guess they could be people with a van. They could be people looking for a van. They could be insurers by the sounds of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. If you've got a great insurance solution, please just get in touch with me directly. My email's Lindsay, LINDSAY @quirkycampus.co.uk. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. So always interested in all kinds of partnerships and collaborations. We've definitely always gone for the sort of collaboration over competition approach. But if you're interested in just seeing more of what Quirky Campers does, you can, just Google us, quirkycampers.com/UK or /NZ if you're interested in going to New Zealand. But we're always interested to hear from people. So it might be you've got some listeners who are already in the tourism industry. We've got lots of people like that who maybe manage Airbnbs or other kinds of things, who just kind of add on a camper van as a really easy additional income stream that doesn't require ownership of property or land or planning permission or whatever. So yeah, always interested to hear from potential owners, and there's tons of information on our website on the Rent Out Your Camper Van page, so you can just go direct and find that there. And yeah, of course, if you want to go on a holiday, check us out. We're also across all social media, and if you just like looking at pretty pictures of vans, which most people do, then check us out on social media.
Definitely, I will do that as well. So it's been fascinating talking to Lindsay Berresford. Thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.